All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Greetings from the Garden State, powered by the New Jersey Lottery. We're here in Asbury Park at the Asbury Park Distilling Company with Kelly Bodnar, head distiller. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do this a little bit different. I'm going to wind up holding this camera for a very long time, but we're going to do something like a little bit different because we talked about this on the phone. What would you call this area that we're in?
This is our production space.
Production space.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I had like a cooler name. Like I said,
Yeah.
Still House.
You could call it a still house.
All right, fine.
Sure.
It's a production space. So we already did, we had Rob and a couple of other guys that used to be here, Bill and Casey, that did the episode we did maybe 2 years ago now, which is almost crazy to think that was that long ago. But I'm excited to chat with you because now you're not new, I mean, you've been doing this now for a while. You've been here, like you said, for how long?
6 years.
6 years.
Yeah.
And head distiller for?
Well, almost a year.
Almost a year.
Yeah.
So how's that transition been?
It was a learning curve for sure. A lot of it is just doing the same things that I was doing before, but now I'm more in charge, which is an adjustment period. But it's been pretty, I don't want to say a smooth transition. There were some bumps in the road, but we got over them, and it's been going well.
Yeah,
so.
For sure. So So 6 years ago you started here. What were you doing before that? Were you like, boy, I really want to make booze when I grow up? Was that like a thing that you were thinking?
No, I was like younger, but I started bartending and I got really like nerdy, learning about like all the different spirits and all that sort of stuff. Like I thought about being a sommelier, like looking into that, and I really was just more interested in spirits. So I visited a distillery in Nashville, and I like realized like you could do that for a job. So then when we heard about this place, I kind of like knocked on the door and was like, "Hey, you hired? Like, you need help?"
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, that's cool. And like it's interesting because I remember when we did talk with Bill, like he had gone to like school and all this other stuff to kind of like learn the process, and your experience or like education of it has been
mostly hands-on.
real world, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So talk to me also about kind of like that, like when you first started, like what did they have you do?
Yeah, so when I first started, I mostly like helped like label bottles, like packaging, like all kind of like the menial labor that you need a lot of help with. There's a lot of it involved in the manufacturing process because, like this is not the most high-tech kind of operation. We don't have like big bottling lines or anything like that. A lot of it's done by hand. And so I was doing a lot of that stuff and then just like asking questions as I go. I do really like science, and I was kind of thinking about going into science when I went to school for the first time, but like didn't want to waste my money on an education where I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, right.
So since then I kind of went back to school part-time. I'm studying food science at Rutgers, like very long process of getting my bachelor's there, but it is like there's a lot of science involved to it, but a lot of it is also just like logistics and like learning like the nuances of like specific places and specific spirits that you're making. So.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting too because I don't think that there's a lot of female head distillers out there. Probably more than there used to be, but still not that many.
Definitely more than there used to be.
Yeah.
We're in the right direction.
Sure. Yeah.
We'd love to see more.
The climb.
We'd love to see more.
Yeah. And so, like, when you're in the here and doing this stuff, like, obviously, or not obviously, I shouldn't say that, but there are recipes that are kind of like for the products that you guys make here, but then creating new stuff. Is that something that you're like often working on?
Yeah, a little bit. So like most of the products that we have are all recipes that were like made by Bill, and I really like them and I don't want to change them.
Sure.
Because it's been working for us. We don't want to change any of it. So like most of the stuff that we've been making is all it's all Bill's recipes that I'm just trying to kind of honor and take care of. The Pazam, our pistachio almond liqueur, which I don't think was here the last time that you were here.
No, but I've had it and it's dope.
Thanks.
Yeah,
that's my recipe. So, so that's one product that's like fine. And then from there, we're kind of like we're thinking about like working on other products, but always kind of doing a little bit of research. But we don't really like to bring anything out that's not 100%.
Not ready.
So exactly.
Yeah. Can we talk about the production space?
Yeah.
So like, what do we have in here, and we can walk around and talk
Yeah.
about it. But like, what are the things that people should know about a distillery production space?
Yeah, so right behind us, this is the biggest key piece of equipment. This is our still. This is custom made for us by a company called Carl. They're one of the world's oldest brewing manufacturers, or like brewing equipment manufacturers. But this is kind of a hybrid model. So this part of the still here is called the pot. And it's kind of looks like what you would find in like Scotland or Ireland. They're like big pot stills. The part on the top is the line arm, and that directs the vapors up and over towards the condenser. The part in the middle is called the column. It's like kind of like what you would find in a bourbon distillery in like Kentucky, or like in a big vodka distillery, because it's got a lot of copper plates that create additional sites of distillation, so you get a lot more like efficiency in getting things to higher proofs and cleaner flavors when you include the column, which we can do for some spirits. We don't have to do for all of our spirits. And then the condenser is the part that cools all of the vapors back down to a liquid. So what's cool about ours is that we can it's modular. We can kind of change up some of the pipes so that it works the way we want it to work for different spirits.
Yeah.
Which is important for if we have a lot of different products.
Definitely. And so the products that we're making in this production facility are what?
We make vodka, gin, aquavit, which is kind of like a gin.
Yeah.
We have a limoncello and a pistachio liqueur, and then the main thing that we're making is whiskey. We spend the most time making that. We're making bourbon whiskey right now, which is out. We release that like 2 times a year. We'll probably increase a little bit within the next few years.
Yeah.
And then we also are laying down malt whiskey, but malt whiskey takes a long time to age,
Sure.
especially because we're doing it in used oak.
Okay.
So we're making malt whiskey. It's just not ready.
Yeah. And so like the process, like when you're making all those different kinds of things, and obviously, people are familiar with them mostly in the sense that they drink them.
Yeah.
But like maybe like I wouldn't realize that those things are distilled almost kind of in a similar way up until a certain point. Is that right?
Yeah, it's pretty accurate.
So like this system, which is also crazy that you guys produce so much with just this.
Yeah.
Which is insane, but like the process is essentially the same, so you don't necessarily have to have like a totally different vodka space or like a different gin space or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it does have the still has a little bit of a flavor memory. So you have to start, like we basically work on like a production cycle. So we start with our most neutral spirits, and then we'll make vodka first, and then we'll make gin. And you can only make something that's more flavorful after that, so that like the flavor memory that's in it doesn't you don't contaminate your vodka with like bourbon flavors.
Sure.
But then we'll do a real deep clean using some pretty like caustic and acidic chemicals, like getting a really, really deep clean on the copper, and then we'll start that cycle over again.
Yeah. What about over there? Those look like brewery tanks.
Yeah.
Can we talk about those?
They're basically brewery tanks.
Okay, let's go over there.
So yeah.
Do a walk and talk. This will follow us.
There you go, yeah. So the first part of the process when you're making...
Oh yeah, the process, yeah.
Yeah, the first part of the process when you're making whiskey is to make what's called distiller's beer.
Okay.
So all of this equipment is going to look very similar to what you find in a brewery because it's basically brewery equipment.
Yeah.
We have a mill on the other side of that wall, which we can get some footage of in a
Sure.
little bit if you want.
Yeah.
But there's a mill on the other side of the wall. We'll load up grain into the mill, and that'll come up an auger and into this is our mash tun here. So the grain, and then we'll add water to it. So there's a grain water slurry, gets cooked in like a series of like heating and like holding and cooling.
Yeah.
To convert the starches to sugars, and then these are our fermenter tanks here. So actually there's whiskey in there right now. We're waiting to be distilled on Monday.
Cool.
Or I'm sorry, like wort in there right now.
Yeah.
But there's stuff fermenting in there. That's why it smells so nice.
Yeah, it smells great.
Yeah.
What makes a distiller's beer? Like, what is that in comparison to like A normal beer.
A normal beer, yeah. So the first big thing is that we don't separate the grain out. So
Okay.
brewers have to separate the grain out after they've done kind of their steep. They have to separate the grains because the husks of all the grains have tannins in them, and tannins can make your beer really, really bitter. Tannins, fortunately, they won't distill over, so like they're not very volatile, so we don't have to worry about them. And the benefit to that is that we get to like extract as much flavor and as much sugar out of the grains as possible.
Yeah.
So what's in there it kind of looks a little bit more like oatmeal than a beer. Like
Interesting.
it still has all of the grain in there.
Yeah.
Not everywhere does it like that. Some places do it like a normal beer. And then the other big difference is that we don't hop the grains.
Yeah.
So like a brewery would do their extraction, they'd separate out all the grains, and then they'd boil it with hops to get kind of those bitter flavors from those. So.
Yeah. So you have this oatmeal, basically.
Yeah.
And then kind of where does it go from here?
So from here, we have these hoses, and we'll pump it over from here to the still. So that's what we'll do on Monday.
Yeah.
We'll pump it over, and then there's 2 distillations when you make whiskey. The first one's called the low wines distillation. So you're just stripping out all the alcohol that you can get from it. You're going from this gets to about 8% to 10% if we're really lucky.
Yeah.
And then when we strip it, it goes to about 30%. So we can collect as much of that alcohol as possible. And then we'll do it through the still one more time. And then it goes from that 30% all the way up to like 70 to 80%, which is what ends up going into the barrels.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so when it goes into the barrels, like what does that do? Like what does that do for like a whiskey, let's say?
So the first thing that it does, like you'll notice when whiskey comes out of the still, it's clear.
Yeah.
Because like those proteins, those color bodies are not going to come over. So the first thing that you're doing is you're getting all of that beautiful color that whiskey gets. You're getting all the flavors from the wood. Like these barrels are charred, so that like breaks down the cellulose into sugars that are a little sweeten the whiskey a little bit. But it also has all these like really beautiful flavors. They have vanillin, they have eugenol, which is like clove.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of phenolic compounds and things that make whiskey taste delicious.
Sure.
And then the other thing that happens in the barrel is that there's like a little bit, the wood is microporous, so like a little bit of oxygen gets in there, and the oxidative reactions that happen in there will mellow the whiskey and make it like a little bit more palatable and kind of transform some of those other flavors into more of the things that we're looking for.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're obviously not making barrels, but like when you, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, I mean, that's like a lot of what I would imagine.
Yes.
But so like when you're, like the barrels that you're getting, that could have like a pretty big impact on what it tastes like.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And so how do you almost kind of like control the flavor that you're getting out of the barrel?
So
if that makes sense.
there's 2 things to that. The first is to just trust your barrel maker. Like
Sure.
we really like the company that we're using. It's the Barrel Mill.
Yeah.
And so we really like the quality of work that they do. We can't make the barrels ourselves. That's a really highly skilled process. So the first is picking the right barrel maker. And then the other part is that you can order them with different levels of char.
Okay.
So you can do like a toasted inside, or you can do char all the way to 4. And that depends on how hot it gets and how deep the like burn goes into that wood, and that it'll extract more flavors. But also if you're planning on aging it for a long time, sometimes you can extract too much flavor. So it's all about like kind of playing around with what the right like char level is for you.
Yeah.
We do char number 3, so we're aiming for about 4 years.
Right.
So we find that it's not too overwhelming by that point, but it gives a lot of like those nice like sugars and flavors.
Yeah.
The Mayo Performing Arts Center is the heart of arts and entertainment in Morristown, New Jersey. MPAC presents over 200 events annually and is home to an innovative children's arts education program. To see MPAC's upcoming schedule of world-class concerts, stand-up comedy, family shows, and more, head to mayoarts.org or just click the link in our show notes.
Hey folks, I want to tell you about the crew over at Make Cool Shit. These are the magicians who recently gave our podcast a jaw-dropping makeover. You know how we roll here at Greetings with the Garden State podcast, right? We're all about that Garden State attitude. Well, Make Cool Shit shares that same vibe, and they've got something absolutely epic to offer. It's called the Unlimited Cool Shit Design Subscription. It's a game changer, my friends. Imagine this: unlimited creativity, one flat monthly fee, and none of that boring stuff. It's like having your very own army of design superheroes on speed dial. Whether you're a fresh face startup or a seasoned business looking to shake things up, the team at Make Cool Shit has got your back. It's all about making your brand sizzle, no matter where you are in your journey. So if you're ready to turn your ideas into mind-blowing realities, then it's time to connect with Make Cool Shit. You can check them out on Instagram at WeMakeCoolShit or visit their website, WeMakeCoolShit.co. Remember, that's co, not com.
And so I think this also kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, like some of the stuff that, like the almond liqueur, and like trying stuff. Like obviously, like this is a process that takes like a long time. So, and how long did you say that this would be in the barrel for?
4 years.
So like that's hard to really kind of, test, So like how do you test? Like if you're trying to make something different, maybe not a whiskey that has to be in there for so long, but if you are trying to test stuff, like do you do this whole process with a full tank basically?
Yeah, we have. So like whiskey's tough. You have to just kind of like have some faith and it's almost better if you get a little like difference between batch to batch, because then 4 years from now you have a little bit more choice between barrels.
Right.
Like right now, like we're preparing to release our next batch, a small batch, and we had maybe like 10 barrels that were the right age, and then we have to kind of like sift through those to taste them, see which ones are ready, which ones need to age a little bit longer, and then play with different combinations of those. And the more barrels and the more variants and flavors you have, like the better it is for you to be able to like kind of
dial it in a little
dial
bit.
it in.
Yeah,
exactly.
Interesting. And so like I'm sure like the scheduling of this, like you mentioned with the still, just like knowing kind of like the whole process, you have to be like very regimented about that schedule, right?
A lot of Excel spreadsheets. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a specific, like, because we try to go from least flavorful to most flavorful for the still, but we also like this sits for 2 weeks, so we brew, and then this sits for for a week. So we brew, and then the fermentation sits for about a week, and then it has to like immediately be distilled. So there's some things that are more time sensitive, and then like a vodka distillation, we can be like, oh, like we'll just do that next week.
Yeah, right.
So you got to kind of be like, what's the most important thing, and kind of work backwards from there.
Right.
And then the same with like bottling and blending and that sort of stuff. We have limited amount of equipment. The pump that we use to kind of like blend everything together, that also has a flavor memory, so we still also have to reset that.
Yeah.
So we also have to go from least flavorful to more flavorful when we're bottling, so that also has a little cycle. So just kind of like a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
But that's the fun part. It's like a logic puzzle.
Yeah, for sure. And so let's like we'll zoom in here to the stuff, the actual product. So like this is, we got them all.
Yeah, we have most of them.
Most of them.
These are the ones that we give out on our tour right now as samples. So we have the vodka, the gin. This is barrel finished gin. So this is just gin that has spent 3 to 4 months in a barrel, like the 30-gallon barrels that are here.
Yeah. What does that do to the gin? What does it make it taste like?
A lot of the citrus goes away, and it gets a little mellow. You get a little bit of like the vanilla, a little bit of like the tannins, but you get a lot more of those like baking spices, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
It gets it like somewhere in between the flavor profile of a whiskey or a gin, so it's really cool for cocktails.
Yeah. I always see it in liquor stores, but like I'm not a gin drinker.
Yeah.
Not really. So like I never really go for it. But
this is the one that I tried where I was like, I need to work here. Like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this one you're producing pretty consistently, right? Because I know the small batch is small, like it's limited.
It's limited.
That is that one's my favorite personally.
Mine too.
Yeah.
We put the most effort into that one, so I think that's probably why I like it so much. But the small batch bourbon it takes 4 years for us to get it to maturity, and then there's a whole like a couple month process of like selecting all the barrels and figuring out, and then getting ready to put it out there in the world. But
and then so let's talk about the Passam. Did I say that right?
Pazam.
Pazam.
And it's more fun if you shout it.
Yeah. All right. I like that. So let's talk about like that. So why this? Like why an almond liqueur is gonna be the thing that you're gonna make the
the almond liqueur. Honestly, there was I like after dinner drinks.
Sure.
But I would always get myself into a situation where I'm like, do I want a Sambuca? Do I want an Amaretto? Do I want this? So like, do I, you know what I mean?
All of them?
Do I want all of them? And you can't have all of them
No,
because
well, you mean
you could. But you don't want to hold up that table for that long.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
It's such a hospitality thing to say.
yes, yeah. You don't want to hold up that table over so long, and you want to be able to get home.
Yeah.
So like, yeah. So I just wanted to make like all my favorite parts of after dinner drinks and put it into one thing. The testing process, we have a little mini still that's over there, and so I just kind of played around with like different flavor combinations. We distill it with tart cherry, cinnamon, clove, allspice, a little aniseed. There's some orange peel in there, so it's got like a little bit more depth in the backbone.
Yeah.
And then we have the one thing I had a lot of trouble with was like nuts have like a tendency to go really rancid, so I had a lot of issues with getting the right pistachio and almond flavors. So we ended up going with an extract for that.
Yeah.
That's another thing where you're like, you just have to like your vendor because
Sure.
you have to trust them. You
Yeah.
have to like know their process. But we ended up going with an extract for that, and like, I like it. I think it's
great.
I think it's sweet enough.
Yeah.
And it's sippable. It's not overly like cloyingly sweet.
Yeah.
You know. So
I was at a dinner, and I don't even think this had gone like on the menu here or wherever yet. And Rob brought some for us to try, and
Yeah.
we had it after dinner, and it was awesome.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're talking about like flavors
Yeah.
and stuff. At what point in this whole process? I mean, obviously, like, you know, your whiskey's and bourbons are gonna take flavors from the wood, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
but like the gin. When does the gin get those flavors that we're talking about, or the pizzam?
Yeah,
See?
so the gin and the Bazam get most of their flavor from the distillation. So
Okay.
we have a neutral grain spirit that we bring in from an outside supplier.
Yeah.
It's basically like alcohol that's distilled to just be high proof. And so we have to do a lot of cleaning up to get it to taste the way we want it to. We also make our vodka out of that. Like we redistill it and we make select what part of the distillation we want to collect to make sure that we're getting only the good stuff out of it. But we start with a neutral spirit and we'll add all of our botanicals in there. At this point, the gin is so dialed in that I'm just like weighing out exactly the same recipe every
Yeah.
single time.
Right, best gin in the world.
Best gin in the world,
Yeah.
2021.
Yeah.
But we'll add all the botanicals into the still and like let them macerate for about an hour, like just take a bath in there, hang out, and then that helps like infuse all those flavors into the alcohol. So when the vapors come out, they're kind of like clung to each other, and we get those flavors coming out in the distillate. And all of those flavors have different volatilities too. So like as the gin is coming out, first it tastes like orange, and then it'll taste like something else,
Yeah.
and like it kind of tastes different the whole time, which is really cool. It's fun to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go back over
Yeah.
here. Maybe we can kind of. Oh, that looks good. So we were talking like off mic about we were technically on mic, but the show hadn't started yet. But like the Moonshiner show and like different things that you've been able to do in this new role, like what are some of your favorite things that you've been able to do? Like, is
Yeah.
that one of them?
Yeah, it was definitely a cool experience.
Yeah.
Like, I mostly just kind of did it for the story because, like, who else gets to say? Like, I've done a reality competition show. Like,
Yeah.
that's fun.
Yeah.
And it was definitely a cool experience. Like, I've met some people through that show that I'm still in contact with from, like, even this industry. So that was really cool. I don't know. I think just, like, being able to do this is the coolest part.
Yeah.
I don't have to like sit at a desk all day, which is
Tell me about it.
nice.
Yeah.
Just once a month, like doing like paperwork, but
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, but I think just like interesting and cool because it's like, you know, it's like one of those jobs that people are like, wow, like how do you even become that?
Yeah.
You know, because I feel like, I mean, there are like distillers and stuff like that exist, like they are there because we drink them. But I think that people just like don't even realize that people actually have to make this stuff, you
Yeah.
know, and it's just like to have that kind of epiphany, like this is what you wanted to do, and now you're doing it at, in my opinion, probably the best distillery in the state.
Yeah, I really like
I
where
think it's
we're
cool.
working.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that out loud. So you have those products, you know, that you've been producing now for a while. The Pizzam, is out there. Like, what are you like rolling different ideas of like things that you want to try or do or make or whatever, or you just kind of like, let's go a full year first before we start, going crazy.
Yeah, it took me, like, I wanted to make sure that, like, I had, like, a good routine and I was keeping up with all the products, like, before I even started thinking about other things.
Sure.
We are releasing a brandy that we made 2 years ago.
Cool.
Soon. So, like, I mean, I helped with that for sure. So that's kind of cool to see. And then, like, beyond that, like, I'm trying to kind of put together, like, it's a tough balance between making sure that you have all of the stuff that you need, right? I want to lay down as much whiskey as I can, as much bourbon as I can, but I also kind of want to play around with other whiskeys, and I kind of also want to play around with other, like, spirits. So nothing, like, immediately in the pipeline, but
Sure. No, I get
definitely doing some R&D.
Yeah. What are, like, these for?
These are just totes that we use for high-proof storage, so we distill into them.
I don't know, I just saw like a bunch and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
ask about that. And the barrels and everything, like, there's obviously more barrels somewhere, I would imagine.
Yeah,
right?
they're at our warehouse.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have about 153-gallon barrels at the warehouse, another 30 single malt barrels. We've got the 16 that are here are our barrel finished gin and our double barrel bourbon, like the finishing casks, because they stay in barrel for a little bit less time. We have like a bunch of them down the street, and then, I mean, like, there's no wood to knock on, but hopefully we also expanded to even more space. I know. Not in my arm length.
Reach.
But hopefully, like, we continue growing and we get to expand into even more space and lay down even more whiskey.
For sure. So when you do like one process of this, and we'll take whiskey again because with the barrels and everything, like how many barrels does that make? And then how many bottles are in a barrel?
Yeah, so one brew.
Yeah.
So like it takes 1 day to do a brew, and then that sits for about a week, and then it's 2 days of low wines, and then 1 more day of our spirit distillation, our second distillation. That gives us 1 barrel.
Right.
And so we do 2 of those cycles every 2 weeks.
Okay.
So we'll do 2 brews, and then we'll do 4 low wines, and we'll do 2 spirit distillations. So we get 2 barrels out of every 2 weeks. So it's definitely a labor of love.
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I figured, like looking at like the size of that and the size of the barrels and like, all that other stuff, I was like, all right, maybe like 5, 6, something like that. And so then like what are the 750 milliliters, like the big bottle?
Yeah,
right?
those are normal size bottles.
Yeah, so like how many bottles are coming out of that barrel?
Oh, I could do some math. So we get about 20% loss. We get a 20% loss. There's 53 gallons, so say we get like 50, and it's like 0.2 gallons per. I don't know that math off the top of my head.
That's
I could
okay.
use a
We don't have to-
calculator.
we won't put
Okay,
that in.
yeah. Like maybe like, I could do it real quick on a calculator.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. I get asked that like so often, and I always forget. Like I'll do the math, and then I'll be like.
I think it just a lot of times because people don't necessarily like.
It's good context for
think
sure.
of it because people don't always see the barrels, so they don't think of the barrels. They think of like bottles and. How many drinks am I going to get out of that?
It goes in at 120 proof, and the other thing is that we're bottling it at 92, so that changes a lot.
Okay.
So we're going to say if you're 120 divided by 92 divided by 0.198. So like 270, so like almost 300 bottles in a barrel.
Oh, that's way more than I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, almost 300 bottles in a barrel if we're getting good losses. Sometimes it's really unpredictable. We actually had, the last batch that we had, it went into barrel at 120 proof, and it came out at 135, and I like redid the math like 5 times. I was like, no way. Yeah. But like if it's really humid, more alcohol will come out of the barrel.
Interesting.
And if it's really dry, more water will come out of the barrel.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, there's a word for that.
Osmosis.
Yeah, it's diffusion, right? So
sure.
they're going from like a less concentration to more concentration to less concentration. So depending
that
on
point,
your
you're like, oh,
climate.
shit, you know,
yeah,
like,
like and places like Colorado see like crazy losses.
Yeah.
So like you'll rarely see anything that's super old there. But we're fortunate that we're getting more alcohol out of the not more alcohol, but like higher alcohol.
Sure.
Out of the barrel.
Yeah.
Because more water is evaporating.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Like these, so, I mean, I think you know, like I've traveled all over the state.
Yeah.
We've done distilleries, breweries, and vineyards and wineries and stuff. And like the brewery thing to me is like, I get it, you know, even like the vineyard thing, I get it, but I know that it's, you know, if you have a bad rain season, you're like screwed for an entire year. But this is like thinking 4 or 5 years down the road in some cases, which is like insane, you know, to think about like all the stuff, all the steps that have to take place, all the unknown variables that are going to kind of happen in that 4 to 5 year span when you do actually like, you know, open it up and check it, you know, it's gotta be like nerve wracking. It's making me nervous just thinking about it.
Yeah, it is a little like that. I always like kind of get shocked by it where I'm like, yeah, so in 2028, this is, and I'm like, oh my God, like 2028. But you do really have to think of ahead that much. And then the other part of it is that you really need to learn. It's like one of the first things you have to get used to in this industry is that like you just have to learn to let go of the things that you can't control.
Yeah.
Because there's so many of them. Like it's a spontaneous, like all of the oxidative processes that like make whiskey taste good, like all of it's spontaneous and you can't control. There's just so much that you can't control. So you're like, I'm just gonna set myself up for success and worry about it in 4 years.
Just let it
you
go.
know?
Yeah.
So that is a hard thing to learn, especially because I'm very like type A, like I want to control as much as I can.
Yeah.
But it is kind of fun to plan that far ahead. And even the single malt, like I don't even know if that'll be ready in 4 years. That might be like a 5, 6, 7, 10-year thing.
Yeah.
So we don't really know until like we're trying it every year. We'll see.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. And so when you did make the move from assistant distiller to head distiller, you said there was like a learning curve almost. Like what was like the thing that almost was like the hardest thing to kind of make that adjustment for? Just like not having someone be like, hey, go do this. You have to be the one that actually like does it.
Kind of. No one had my back. So
Sure.
I like when I was working for Bill, like he had my back. You know what I mean? And I tried to have his back. And like he was really great at teaching. So it wasn't like I felt like there was anything what I didn't know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much that I don't know, but like you're always learning in this industry. I think the biggest thing is that like nobody was like, hey, go home, you know? Like, so I would feel like, I'd be like, I have to get so much done. And like, really like, it's okay.
Yeah.
So that was like a big part of it is just kind of being like, okay, so how do I spread out and manage my own time? Like I'm not a nice boss to myself. I'd like to think I'm a nice boss to other people, but I'm not a nice boss to myself.
Right.
So that was the biggest thing for sure. And then just like kind of like grappling with the long term of everything. Like, that's
like trying to put that in
hard.
perspective, I would imagine is really tough. Yeah.
Because there's some stuff that we have to like focus on right now, but like if you also let go of thinking about the future, then you're like, oh no, we're out of like the barrel finished gin. If you're not thinking 4 months ahead, like you're like, oh no, we're out of stock. Like how are we gonna deal with that? Like, we don't want people to run out of it and not have it on the cocktail menu. So. That's the hardest thing to kind of adjust to, I think.
Like I think I'm a patient person, but also like when I'm working on something, I need it like it needs to get done. Like this show took like maybe a month to really kind of put together, and then now when we kind of like put the rest of it together on the fly, But to think about 5 years from now, like where the show's gonna be or whatever, like or in your case, what's coming out of that barrel, forget it. I don't know if I'd be able to handle it.
Yeah. I feel like I've gotten a little bit of a better handle on it now, but it's definitely an adjustment for sure.
Well, this has been so cool.
Thank you.
Because I like thought I sort of knew just from watching TV, but like to actually like be in here and kind of have you like point out everything and talk about it and all that kind of stuff. I really appreciate you giving me the little tour and for doing the show.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we'll put all the AP distilling stuff in the show notes. Is there any place you want people to go to learn more about you?
I mean, like I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok. It's at kelly.distills.
Okay.
I try to do more like educational. Like I keep it more around my work than my personal life. So it's not just going to be like me like out at brunch.
Sure.
So yeah, like I do try to do some like educational stuff. I do like vlogs of my like daily life here sometimes.
Cool.
So that's yeah.
Yeah.
If you wanna
Awesome.
check that out.
Yeah, for sure. We'll put that in the show notes too. So, well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So this has been the Greetings from the Garden State podcast. I don't know which camera to look in now. Greetings from the Garden State podcast, powered by the New Jersey Lottery. We were here in Asbury Park today at the Asbury Park Distilling Company with head distiller Kelly Bodnar. Thank you for listening and watching. We'll catch you next time.